Greetings from Varaja Life and a very warm welcome to all our viewers who are and will be joining us from all over the world over these 2 days. This is Varaja Bajaj, convener National Ability Summit and founder Varaja Life. I'm extremely delighted and overwhelmed to host you for these 2 days while we welcome 50 plus speakers from 6 countries joining us on one common mission: disability inclusion. Defining abilities and reskilling for employment for persons with disabilities is going to be the key, not just for inclusion, but also economy generation. The World Bank considers that leaving persons with disabilities outside the economy translates into a foregone GDP of 5 to 7%. That's a big, big number. According to WHO, disability world, 1 billion people, or even 15% of world's population, experience some sort of disability. Although there is no recent census on disability data available in India for this population of society, post COVID, the disability numbers are expected to increase. Developed countries like UK and USA admit a 22 and a 26% disability population respectively, while India still settles under 3%. Do we need to change the formula of calculation, the number of persons with disabilities, and have greater emphasis on their inclusion here on? The world has changed overnight from real to virtual reality, which is why we are here. Otherwise, National Ability Summit would have been an offline event, and we would have been meeting all these lovely people in person and not virtually. Consumer demands and their preferences have changed overnight. Skill requirements have changed overnight. People are working from home with absolute digital dependence. But have we left out a very important segment of our society, which is people with disabilities, and also the requirements of uh, employment and skill development, which have changed overnight? But let's hear it from the experts. I wouldn't want to guide this discussion. We have some very lovely people from all over the world who have joined us today with remarkable experience in the area of disability. We have Judith Human. She's a lifelong advocate for rights for persons with disability from USA. She was denied, and this is something that really inspired me. She was denied the right to attend school because she was considered a fire hazard at the age of 5. And I think that's where her battle began. And we will talk about that a lot more once we have Judith coming here. Judith is also featured in Crip Camp, a Disability Revolution, a recent documentary by James Lebret and Nicole Newman, produced by Obama. And trust me, Judith, you did inspire a lot of people after that film. It was a reach out to a lot of us here to know what America is today and a lot what has gone around the world in terms of accessibility, in terms of inclusion, and what role you had played in the 1970s and 80s and thereafter to bring about inclusion. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much. Let me just describe myself. I'm a white disabled woman. I'm almost 73 years old, but I dye my hair so it's my normal color. I'm wearing glasses. I am wearing a bright pink and black jacket with matching shirt underneath, and we're in our foyer. So I have all kinds of family pictures and memorabilia behind me. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Judith. Next, we have Ira Singhal. She's the Joint Director, Department of Social Welfare and Department of Women and Child Development, Brand Ambassador for India for Department of Disability, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. And a lot of what I know about disability, and in fact, our tagline, which says recognize abilities over disabilities, It is Ira who's inspired me to start looking at abilities for persons with disabilities, and we will get to know a lot about that. But before that, a very warm welcome to you, Ira.
Thanks, Varaja.
Next we have is Rachel Arfa. Uh, the less I say, better, because there is a lot that can be spoken about her. She was appointed commissioner at the Mayor's Office, Chicago, for persons with disabilities. Uh, Rachel is the first deaf commissioner of MOPD and the highest ranking deaf person to serve in a city government leadership role in the United States. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you so much for the welcome. It's so nice to be here with all of you. I'm going to do a visual description of myself. So I'm a white woman and I have short brown hair that's shorter than and round hoop earrings, and I'm wearing a light blue shirt with flowers and here the purple necklace. And behind me at one side, police displayed at a brother's pattern, sort of a light green, and at the other side is your doing. It's so nice to be here with all of you.
And that was the most elaborate description and the brilliant one, and you look really pretty. Next, we have Michael Ramon. She is the CEO of Access Israel, who's joined us from Israel. Mikhail has been leading the international relations of the organization, which has successfully created and led an international network of experts and leaders from all over the world, promoting accessibility and inclusion for all. And what I learned from Mikhail is about service accessibility, which we will talk about during the session. But before that, a very warm welcome to you, Mikhail.
Thank you very much. And I'm very, very happy and honored to be here, especially with the amazing panel that is beside me. And if I will describe myself, I'm a white woman in my, let's say, just crossed the 50, brown long hair, black shirt, because I heard it's good on Zoom. And in my background, I have, I will just point out to you, it's a picture that was drawn in memory of my deputy, Netta Rotman, and it is the most accessible picture in Israel. It's a painting her father painted, and it is accessible for the blind, for the people with cognitive disability, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very honored to have Netta, who started the international work with me, right here beside me.
Wow, we would like to know a lot about that during the session, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, we have Adam Heckman. He is the Director of Corporate Affairs in Microsoft Philanthropies. Prior to this role, Adam worked in Microsoft's technology and corporate responsibility in US. Adam has served his community in various capacities, and I have list of organizations where he is the board of director. And I thought of getting Adam here because while we are discussing policies, while we are discussing employment, Microsoft has led the role when it comes to including persons with disabilities in terms of employment. And we thought we will have you to on behalf of Microsoft, and also a lot of other work that you've been doing to join us on this panel. It wouldn't be complete without you. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you, and I'll describe myself. I identify myself as a white male. I typically have short hair, but during COVID, it's now in a ponytail. Short beard, post 50. I am sitting in my home office, and behind me is my one little dog, who I refer to as my defense minister, and my other little dog, who is my chief happiness officer, and an impossibly growing list of books over my right shoulder that I am trying to get through. And I'm in Chicago.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you for having us.
And my description would be, I'm a proud Indian woman wearing an olive top. I have to be specific about the color because my background is fashion. So, and my hair are a little below the waist. I'm told that I have a very sharp nose and the widest smile. And I'm sitting against the wallpaper, which is a collage of old book papers. It inspires me all the time and keeps me thinking. On that note, we welcome the panelists here, and we are going to be discussing about the employment for persons with disabilities and how that is important to generate economy for every country. I would like to start with you, Rachel. Rachel, does your country have a government policy of reservation or government incentives for organizations to employ persons with disability?
So I can't answer this question to justice to this question without first acknowledging the contributions of Julie Human, who has been such a trailblazer for so many of our civil rights. And the that is shown in the movie Clip Camp, that begins to tell the story of her legacy and other work that she's done to help push for civil rights for people with disabilities here in the United States and created a model internationally. So I want to make sure to pay respect to that, because without that vote, I would be here today and have the opportunities that I have to be a deaf attorney and to be able to do have developed my own career as a civil disability rights attorney. So this is personal to me too, because it had an impact on my own career. So we here in the United States, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. Here there are 5 tenets. The first tenet is unemployment, which gives people with disabilities civil rights protection in every aspect of the job. And in my previous role, before I was named Commissioner of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, I represented people with disabilities who experience employment discrimination. It worked to enforce these laws, because you have to have laws, but you also need to enforce them. It makes sure that people give meaning to the laws and follow through. So under Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, it says that no one with a disability could be discriminated against in every aspect of the employment process. And that starts with applying for the job. So we got a job interview. It was given a job offer, asking for feasible accommodations at the job, and making sure that they're able to access the privileges and benefits of employment at the job, all the way to termination, and making sure that people with disabilities have all the accommodation that they need, and that feasible accommodation is so important, because it helps to create a level playing field, so that the person with disability can focus on doing the job and not worrying about any accessibility, because it provided to be able to contribute and not have to navigate barriers. But I will have to say that people with disabilities are the best problem solvers around. We have different accessibility snafuls that come up every single day, and you develop skill in navigating that. And I think that's such a huge asset to any employment, any employer and workforce, because we're constantly thinking, how do I navigate it? Here that maybe I be too erratic, but I know that I'm entitled to access. How do I get there? How do I negotiate, persuade, and ask for the rights that I'm entitled to? So the ADA has really helped to transform so many workplaces. It creates so many opportunities. I will say that employers, we still have so much more work to do. And we still have more ways that we need to make and increase employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And one of those barriers is working to clean attitudinal changes. There's still so many assumptions that people make about the potential that people with disabilities to contribute if those assumptions are wrong. And so the more we could raise that awareness and take efforts to challenge any outdated attitudes, the more we can make progress on behalf of people with disabilities.
True, absolutely true. And there's such brilliant work that you have done by making sure that you have, I read somewhere that you have got more than a dozen sign interpreters employed as part of your department. And I think that also sensitize people like us who are doing events at various levels. It does sensitize us to have sign language interpreters and to include the deaf community. Judith, would you want to add to what Rachel said, more so from the ADA perspective, because you have been very closely working on the subject?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Rachel, for your comments. So part of my work experience is I've worked 20 years in the nonprofit sector, but then I worked pretty much between 1993 and 2017, both in the US government and at the World Bank. And so the issue of employment of disabled individuals is really, from my perspective, quite interesting. Organizations that I worked in the nonprofit world were run by disabled people. And in those organizations, we readily were able to find disabled people, and we more naturally made accommodations because we understood what our needs and issues were. And it was just a matter of fact that we had to make sure that we could accommodate people. When I moved into the government and doing work also with the private sector, it's a whole different world, because there are so few disabled people that have been working, and few disabled people in senior leadership positions, that the natural ability to use accommodations is sometimes something that businesses are recalcitrant about. I want to say that there's been some very good work as a result of the ADA and another law called Section 504 and a number of other laws that we have in the US that deal with things like private contractors getting money from the government and their obligation to hire up to a certain percentage of disabled people, as well as federal requirements. I am a very big believer in strong laws. I am also a very big believer in technical assistance for disabled individuals to understand what their rights are under the laws. And I'm also a very big believer that companies themselves need to be getting trained on a regular basis about not only what their obligations are, but what in fact is possible. So technical assistance here, for example, there is an organization called the Job Accommodation Network, JAN. I would suggest that anyone interested in learning more about what our laws in the United States require and what the obligations are, you look them up on the internet. They're a 30-year-old government-funded entity. They are not an advocacy group. They're legally required to basically be giving people factual information about what the law does and doesn't do. Our Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, which oversees Title I employment under the ADA, also is a very important part of this puzzle, making sure that companies that are not doing what they need to be doing are held accountable for that. Now, what I think is very important, I use the word qualifications and not abilities. I actually do not like the word abilities when used for disabled people, because it has a connotation that we're playing with the word disability and we're emphasizing ability. Employers want qualifications. I believe it's important to move away from the word ability because it has a connotation which unintentional is ableist. And it makes us as disabled people basically coming forward, having to be defending ourselves. And so I think, what do employers want? They want qualified people. Now, what does it mean to be qualified? And I think that's a very critical issue. When we look at employment, we need to be looking at the educational chain. Are disabled individuals getting the education that they need from the appropriate time when they're 3, 4, 5 years old? And what are we also doing with individuals who are becoming disabled? I think this is a very important issue because in many of our countries, most of our countries, people are acquiring their disabilities when they're above 20, above 30. Many of them have already been in the workforce, depending on the kinds of jobs they need. But we really need to be emphasizing, when we look at the disability community, where are we finding the weakest link? What do we need to be doing to be able to work in the 21st century? And also with COVID and the changing environment that's going on, we need to be protecting people who've had jobs and are losing their jobs, including those with disabilities. That's, to me, the big emphasis.
Absolutely. And like you rightly said, if I can put that narration, from the Indian perspective, we boast that we are the youngest nation today. The largest amount of youth is in India today, not realizing that very soon this youth will become old and India will become the oldest nation, and we will be dealing with the old age disability. And that is an alarm that is ticking, the clock is ticking for us. And more so now, it is important that we pull up our socks and get ready to handle that situation. And
Can I just say one thing? Sorry. The point that I was trying to make is not relating, and I agree with what you're saying with the aging population, but the point that I'm trying to make is there are many people who are in the workforce who acquire various disabilities. We frequently are not working with them, and they need to be worked with in order to ensure that they can stay in the workforce. And they may need retraining depending on the jobs they've had. But I think we need to be really looking at the breadth of disability in our countries in order to ensure that, for example, 3% in India of disabled people, everybody knows is a joke. I mean, obviously they're using that figure because they're speaking about people who have the most significant disabilities, is my presumption.
Judith, you made a lot of points that I really want to discuss.
Yes, Ira, I also want you to share your personal experience in terms of how you had set examples in India in terms of making authorities to focus on your abilities and not disability.
Right. Thanks, Varja. So Judith, I'm going to tell you how the 3% comes in. Actually, in India, the bigger problem is that most people with disabilities have not been identified. In fact, the parents keep hiding the disability of the child. I know of a girl whose both her parents are doctors, qualified doctors, and this girl's hearing disability gets discovered in class 12th, which is the final year of schooling. So she's 17 years old, her parents are doctors, and that's when her disability is finally discovered. Mainly because in India, families treat disability as something to be ashamed about. So they keep hiding the disability, and which is why the 3% number is also on the higher side when you really take the number of disability certificates that exist in this country, because most people keep hiding the disability and the parents don't acknowledge that the children have disability. And that has a second repercussion wherein it does get discovered or becomes recognized at a stage where it's so obvious that there is no more early intervention systems that can be given to such children. So that becomes quite a bit of a problem. Secondly, you were talking about abilities, not being in the conversation. So I'm actually working on something in India, which is actually about mapping the abilities required for each job. See, I come from a country where most of my population, and especially children with disabilities or people with disabilities are not that educated, because it's very tough for them to reach the school. And I'm not saying that the school doesn't take them in. I'm saying it's so tough for them to travel to school. You know, with COVID and with online teaching, that's become a lot easier. But before that, our transport systems don't exist. For our public transport almost doesn't exist in most of the country. So it's very, very tough for a child with disability to actually travel all the way to school. So most of them don't end up with an education, in which case it becomes important that we find jobs for them wherein we are talking of the abilities. So in fact, I've come up with something where what we're doing is, and Varija, this is what I was mentioning to you, that I am mapping the abilities required for each job. See, precisely what my story was, which you asked me to talk about, is that I'm a person with disability and I was very readily accepted in the corporate sector. My education background is I'm an engineer and I'm an MBA. So I was a strategy manager with Cadbury India, which is now Mondelez Kraft Foods. And I then, while I was working there, I decided that I wanted to work for the society. And I gave this exam, which is how you get into the government in India. So I gave the exam, but I was refused from being allotted a job because of my disability, because my disability did not fit into the list of allowed disabilities for any of the jobs that I was applying to, or that I was by my merit eligible for. And that's how in fact, and the strange part was that as far as the physical abilities required that somebody had set for that job, I fit the criteria. So I was simply rejected because they couldn't understand what my disability was. And when they were making that list of which kind of disabilities they're going to accept and the ones that they are going to reject, somebody just randomly sat one day and just started picking things off, and they kind of forgot that people like me would exist. So what I am now trying to do is, and by the way, in India we do have reservation. We have a policy of reservation in jobs for people with disabilities. So what I am now trying to do is, I'm saying, don't accept a person basis his disability. Take anybody in the world, take any job in the world, find out what are the abilities required for that job, match those two people, and while you find out the abilities of that person, and then you give them the job. Because what happens most often is, because people do not understand disabilities well, and no two disabled people are generally extremely similar. All of us have different requirements, and the way we function out in the world is very different. And that becomes tough for employers, to map us to specific roles, because they do not understand our disabilities. So what I'm saying is, let's map all the abilities required for every job, and then let people apply basis their own abilities, which obviously is similar to qualifications. But in my case, I'm also talking about physical abilities, because that's what I was rejected for, and that's what most of Indian people across here get rejected for. Most of us are rejected because people think we are physically not able to do things, and they keep bringing that part into the conversation. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to map the abilities that you need for any job, and then you don't think of my disability. You cannot talk about what I cannot do. If you need me to do these 10 things in this job and I can do them, you give me a job regardless of whether I have a disability certificate or I don't. If I can do it, you give it to me.
If I could just jump in for a quick second.
Sure.
Offline, I think we need to have, and Rachel and others can be involved with this. Many of the things that you're describing that the Indian government currently uses is grossly illegal in the United States, and is a violation, in my view, of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which the Indian government has in fact ratified. So it would be great for us to be able to have a more meaningful exchange, possibly through the US Embassy, to look at some programs that could enable more sharing of information about how issues that you're discussing would be handled here. And I just want to quickly say, I understand the issue of abilities and qualifications. The reason I really emphasize the word qualifications, that is the word that employers use for their employees. They do not use the word ability when they're putting a job description together. They say, these are the qualifications that I need for the job. I want employers to see disabled and non-disabled individuals as prospective employees and as employees. I don't want them to be caught up in new language that takes them off track. And the issue, and I've been to India a number of times, so I do understand many of the issues that you're raising from a local perspective. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Judith.
I think it's just about the the usage of the word. It's just, I think, syntax of the language.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think even from the terminology perspective, in my putting this whole event together, I have realized that, while in US, a lot of people with disabilities like to be called as people with disabilities, whereas Indian media likes to call them as differently abled and specially abled. So there is a whole debate there, coming from different backgrounds and perspectives.
No, but it's disabled people in the United States. And I want to say this is not just an issue in the United States. It's the terminology that we as disabled people are choosing. And so media here is also frequently using incorrect language, but they are being called out for using incorrect language.
Yes, totally agree. And that's where I also want to bring in Adam, because he comes from the employer side, and Microsoft has set a lot of benchmarks in hiring people with disabilities at top positions, and especially in positions of inclusion, of digital inclusion, and a lot of other spaces. How do you look at, Adam? And I believe there's a large percentage of people with disabilities which are part of Microsoft. Now, what is that percentage, and what is it that you look at when you're likely to hire people with disabilities?
Yeah, and I promise you I will answer that specific question. But first, I want to add to something that Rachel talked about the benefits of people with disability bring an employer, and Judith's comments about what it means to be qualified. Earlier this year, a manufacturer asked us at Microsoft about our inclusive intentional hiring practices, because they saw that there is 2/3 less turnover with people with disabilities in a high turnover industry. And it's because of all of the things that Rachel and Judith had mentioned. Talk about problem solvers. They're people who solve problems and make adaptations to their life every single day. So we held an inclusive briefing for them, so they could learn from us, but we also wanted to learn from them on what they were seeing and some of the interesting things that they were doing globally. Okay, Microsoft. A couple of months ago, I think it was a couple of months ago, time is funny these days. A couple of months ago, we released our diversity and inclusion report for 2020. And this was the first time that our data included the number of employees in the US who self-identified as being a person with disability, which gives us a benchmark for growth and also an understanding for the opportunities ahead. You had asked me about what those numbers were. As of September, 46.1% of US employees responded to the survey, and 13.2% identified as having a disability. So that translates to employees in the US, 6.1% self-identifying as having a disability. And while we're proud of the progress, there's clearly more we can do, right? For one thing, notice that I said the US. We still have to roll this out to the rest of Microsoft and the world, in addition to the US. But our ambition here is to fully represent the population of people with disabilities across the globe, and we take that seriously. Now, having said that, your question was a good one, but the numbers themselves don't tell the full story, right? Every day I hear stories of talent and abilities at Microsoft, and people are having meaningful impact on their peers, on their team, on their cultures, on our products, on me. So we have to look at the qualitative as well as the quantitative.
And if I may take this question also to Mikhail, because that is one of the challenges, while putting this summit together, we were trying to make this as accessible as possible. And from the technology perspective, from the perspective of the interpreters, there are enough issues with regards to sign language interpretation. Different countries have different sign languages. We do have an international sign language, but that is for people who've probably traveled around the world to understand what is an international sign language. So, Mikhail, you have been dealing with a space called service accessibility. As much as we've spoken to a lot of people around accessibility, immediately rings a bell that there is a wheelchair and there's a ramp. That we are trying to educate people about digital accessibility, and you have moved on to talking about service accessibility. Please tell us what it is all about.
So first of all, thank you very much. With your permission, I see this is a free flow panel, and I think it's great. So I would love to to make 3 small comments on whatever was made here before. First of all, to Ira, I have to make a connection, and this is what I love about conferences like this, because you hear great minds from all over the globe thinking about great ideas, and you can connect. And I can tell you, Ira, that there is a great Israeli technology new startup called Skillset, which I would love to make the connection, that they are basically doing what you are saying from a perspective of the abilities needed on a technological level. They're mapping the jobs and enabling people with disabilities to basically use the application and understand if they are able to do the job at hand or what they need to do in order to improve their abilities. So I think that's something that can be very interesting to what you are checking.
I would totally love to work with you on that. Thank you for letting me know.
Perfect. So I will make the connection there. That's one thing.
Can you also share that information with everyone?
I will gladly share it with everyone. That's what it's all about. Thank you very much. Now, another point, and we were talking about terminology, which again, terminology sets, a new reality. And I totally agree with everything. And I must share with you something that I learned just last week. The Zoom enables you to travel all over the world from the comfort of your office. So I was in the expo, in one of the conferences they had in Expo Dubai, and I learned there that the terminology used in Dubai is people with determination, which very interesting. In Israel, we use, like Judith say, a person with disability. So that's, again, learning from countries all over the world. Now, and before I continue to the services, I will just say that in Israel, for employment, what we have is a quota system. Basically, it started from unions from the private sectors who decided that all the companies under them will have companies that have more than 100 employees will have a 3% quota of people with disabilities employed. And I can tell you that that was extended to a law in Israel that basically all the public sector has that requirement, and the public sector also, the government and governmental agencies joined that, and now they have a quota of 5%. So this is something, and I know that a lot of people listening to this can say, well, quota, people just check the box and it's not really a great solution. But I can tell you one thing, and I will not elaborate on that, but in Israel, the fact is, before the quota system, 1 out of every 2 people with severe disability looking for work were unemployed, and the situation was deteriorating. And after the quota system, basically the issue was put on the table. It was there, and the change had occurred. And I can tell you that more and more employers are doing it. And our tip is, the question is, how are you doing it? You're doing it because you want to check the box. Usually that won't be sustainable. Or you're doing it because you really understand the importance. You understand what it does to your company. You understand, the advantages. And I can tell you that I'm an employer of more than 100 employees. I always say I'm a proud CEO, and more than 50% are people with disabilities, all types of disabilities. And it is it's the biggest privilege to work in such a place. Now, regarding your, sorry to take time with the comments, but regarding the services. So Israel is unique in that. I think that Israel is the only country in the world where by law, every single service provider has to go through annual training every year on accessibility of services they provide. And at least once every service provider has to go through experiential training, not just talk the talk, walk the walk, really understand how to do it. And I always say that, you can plant the seeds of inclusion in employment or in, providing services to everybody. But if you don't make sure the ground is nourished and watered and prepared for those seeds, nothing will grow out of it. So what we do, we have taken, even before legislation, our methodology is basically the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars of Access Israel is the unique methodology for making services accessible, without spending too much money on, changing, infrastructure or things like that, which are also important, but usually take much longer to do. What we do is the first pillar is knowledge, because when you know something, you're less afraid of it. And, once you know something, the barriers start breaking, but it's not enough, because usually you will remember the last knowledgeable lecture that you had. So we always have to combine it with the other 3 pillars. The second pillar is getting to know the people behind the disability. It's not enough that I will talk. It is not enough that an instructor from Access Israel will talk. We have trained people with disabilities, all types of disabilities. And by the way, I can tell you that many organizations for people with disabilities, when we started this, even before the legislation was in, we heard comments saying, oh, no, it's not so good. It won't be good for the people. It won't be good for the participants who are listening to this. It's a bad combination. And I can tell you it's the most empowering thing for the instructors. And it's the most inspiring things and opening the eyes of the people who are listening to it. So we give opportunities to directly get to know the person behind the disability. That's the second pillar. The third pillar is, once you know something and you get to know the person, walk in their shoes, experience how it is. And I don't know if people here have heard about Access Israel. Maybe you've heard about the crazy Israelis. We are them. We are the crazy Israelis going all over the world with our experiences, taking a subject that is not sexy. It's not that you wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to do today? I really want to try to be blind or try to sit in a wheelchair. Well, we find a way to do it in a way that, first of all, is relevant to the service provider and relates to the services that he provides. And we do it in a way that is innovative and experiential, and people stand in line to do it. So I guess it's working. And after you have the knowledge, and after you have the getting to know the people, and you have the experience, we have the 4th pillar, because eventually you have to take it to the next level. And what we do is we provide tools to change your neck of the world. If you are a CEO of the largest company, or if you're just a temp employee coming to the new restaurant that you're serving the dishes at, doesn't matter. Each one of us can give a more accessible service and make this experience for customers a much better one.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mikhail. And I think that does open our eyes to a lot of new possibilities that one can explore, not just for India, but I think around the world. And we do have your videos playing in between the sessions for people to know what Access Israel is working on.
And we invite everybody to join us, really. It's we're more than happy to share. That's the whole thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would want to come back to Rachel. So Rachel, sorry for my correction there. You work with agencies wherein you bring in interpreters, and you've tried to do that during your tenure. I also want your opinion about, how is it compulsory, or are you even thinking that people, the TV channels should have compulsory sign language interpreter? Do you think something like, or a Netflix, of course they have subtitles, but a live news channel, should they have an interpreter? Do you think something like that would help?
Um, So thank you for the question. So I just wanted to clarify a point that was made earlier, that we don't have 12 sign language interpreters on staff. We do work with a sign language interpreter agency, where we can request interpreters for any of our communication access needs. And I think it's so important to take a broad approach to accessibility. I think even moving any physical access barriers, but then also looking at communication access and how we can approach that as broadly as possible. Like for today, we have open captioning, which is available for anyone to use. I know many people without hearing class who love to watch captions. I think they help all of us. So I always try to take a universal design approach, because I really believe that once you build it, people will come. And I think then historically people have in these is how to any accessibility, because it requires the person with disability to say, hi, I would come, I would like to request accessibility. And after times they may be told, no, not respected, or people with disabilities. To the world who have to educate other people about accessibility. And when you have to do that day to day, it could be exhausting, and it's a lot of emotional labor there. So the more we could do as a society to be proactive about removing all barriers to access, both physical and program access, the more welcoming and inclusive we could be for anybody who wants to participate. So captioning is what we to provide that. So there's that automatic speech recognition is not perfect, like for example, it doesn't capture proper needs, people with access. I have a deaf accent. I went through 18 years of speech therapy, and I show like I have a accent. I can ask all the time, what country are you from? And they always say Chicago. And then the response is, you sound like you have a Chicago accent. But I'm born and raised here in Chicago.
You're good. You're good.
So, but then I also know sign language, and so in sign language it's also been helpful for me, for example, the participating in online webinars too, because there may be things that may not be captured, or there are always technical problems. Thankfully, not this morning, but I really believe in thinking, anticipating any potential problem and having backups for those, but also making sure that we meet as wide a variety of needs as possible. So people require, say, language interpreter, some require captioning, some like both. We should accommodate all of those needs. So right now, with so much emergency information about COVID-19 being presented every single day. I don't know about it in your countries, but here at least we have almost daily 3 weeks right now, virtually 100% going up. So it's crucial for everyone to have access to the same information about how we can stay safe and healthy during this public health crisis. Is we need to make sure not only that there's captioning, so a news station will provide captioning, but that they also have sign language interpreters. And I'm really glad there's so many of our states have provided sign language interpreters. Obviously, there are some resistance in a couple of places. Adams State, which tells me that there's still a barrier, there's an attitudinal barrier that but the effect of that action is exclusion, and people who rely on American Sign Language to access this information will be excluded, and that's unacceptable. We should make sure in every case possible, and also have other options in play to make sure that information is accessible. So it is part of the conclave that's something that I am seeing, and is an increased awareness and prioritization. So I'm hoping that from there we can go look at how we can continue to improve that and make sure that we have diverse data for interpreters in those settings, and make sure that, for example, so I can tell that the news, there's been a lot of awareness about placement of the sign language interpreter, the camera feed. And I see a more intentional effort to make sure that the sign language interpreter is on camera, because more people are recognizing the interpreters and making sure that information is there. So it'd be interesting to see what happens once everybody here has a vaccine and there's not these daily crises every day. What practices we will continue to go through, because we do need, once it's gone, we do need to make sure all of this information is as accessible as possible in all communication forums and rules.
Yes, absolutely, and that's exactly my thought. We've struggled a lot, and that also brings to my next question to Judith. Judith, I feel that every human wants to make an impact. Every human, abled, disabled, wants to include people, wants to organizations. In my experience, think there is an inherent, there might be a discomfort for several reasons. Even smaller organizations do want to include persons with disabilities, but yes, it does come at a certain cost, which probably all organizations cannot afford. How do you think this challenge, this formula for employment can be cracked, if you have any formula?
I think, both Mikkel and Adam can join into this. First, let me really say, for myself, I don't like to be compared to the word able. I just need to say that. So I use identity first language. I'm a disabled person, and I think it really is important. And I understand the different contexts in different countries, but I've been making this point here, and it's really important. The broader issue is on cost. And the reason I'm asking other people to also join in on this, and Rachel too, cost is really not a real issue. The vast majority of disabled individuals, and we've had studies out from this, like since 1970, when a Sears report came out, which at that time was a huge corporation in the United States and around the world, which basically debunked the issue of expenditure. So I think what we need to be able to do is give employers real information about what the costs are, and not allow people, and I know they're not doing this in a malicious way. There is always a presumption that there are high costs to employing disabled people. Someone like Rachel and myself, we have higher costs. Rachel uses sign language interpreters, and I use personal assistants for part of my job. But the vast majority of people are not deaf, do not have significant physical disabilities. So, it's important that we get the data that is really out there. And the other issue, I think, or the many other issues, but one is, and I think one of the reasons why Microsoft and other companies are so really important, is the emphasis needs to be designing inclusion of accessibility in all of our products. So when we're talking about new construction is less than 1% for accessibility costs. And that's true across the board. The average person does not know that, but that's what we're needing to talk about. What is new? What is the cost of renovations? And how do we make accommodations to the built environment? I think we need to recognize that, as Ira was saying earlier, in India, but in every country around the world, there are biases, and those biases lead to discrimination. And the discrimination is justified by misinformation that people have about costs. So not looking at the qualifications that a job requires, and not really finding out what that person needs and whether or not the accommodation is something which is very costly. In the United States, in our law, we actually address the issue of cost. So it's called undue hardship. And basically, if an employer can show that something would be an undue hardship, they would legally not be required to do it. Well, let's basically say that test has never been met, because you have to look at the totality of the budget of a company. So bottom line is, and I think Mikkel and Adam and Rachel and Ira all can speak to the fact that as disabled people are becoming employed in companies, and my language is breaking bread together and learning about how we are qualified individuals, we're problem solvers, we're also pain in the ass people. Not everyone comes from God. And sometimes you make a bad decision and you hire someone, disabled or not, who is not going to be a good employee. And you learn that later, and maybe that means better management training on how you interview people, but don't blame. Like the joke that I've always had is, you hire a disabled person and it doesn't work out, then the employer is not going to look to hire any other disabled people. Hire a non-disabled person that doesn't work out. Does that mean that no non-disabled people will be considered for jobs? People will laugh at that. But the reality is that is what we are still dealing with. And I think it's less, there are many organizations now that are out there working with employers. In the States, we have groups like Disability In, National Organization on Disability, Israel, India. We've all got these organizations where employers are coming together. And I think that's the ultimate objective. Employers who are doing a good job, who can have honest and open discussions about what the issues are that they're facing, where disabled people are meaningfully involved, both in employment and in affinity groups, to really get this discussion to be made real. We need to discuss the biases and discrimination and attitudes that people bring to their job against disabled people, against women, against people in a different caste. All of these things come together. So that's, I think, where we need to be going.
Absolutely. And I think Ira can pitch in because she has multiple roles to play as a law enforcement from the perspective of employment, as person of, she herself has fought several battles trying to make sure that she's accepted as person who she is. So, Ira, would you like to pitch in? How do we crack this formula in terms of employment? I've had experiences where I've hired people with disabilities and it hasn't worked out well for me. I think
Varija, that's
fault as well in terms of understanding whether their skills would fit in the role they're being hired for.
Exactly.
How do we crack this formula?
So that's precisely what I was talking about when I said we need to look at the abilities required for that job. We need to see what all you need that person to do and just focus on that. You just think about, do I need this person to walk 20 miles a day? And then you hire someone who can walk 20 miles a day. You don't then care whether that's a person with, any kind of disability. For example, if it's a person with hearing disability, what normally happens is you see that person and you say, oh, this is a disabled person, they can't do the job. While you haven't even thought about the fact that what all does your job require them to do, and does that actually, hamper their disability? Is it hampering their performance of that? So that's where we need to do. We cannot work on the charity perspective. And in the corporate sector, it's not fair to ask companies to be charitable. But I'm sure the minute we start talking of defining jobs in terms of the tasks required, the abilities required, or the qualifications required, you will get enough people in. And you talked about the cost part of it, right? Let me give you an example. And for a country like India or any of the developing countries, it becomes very, very relevant. Now, if you have a country where only 50% of the people are given jobs or are allowed to work, and each of them earns 100 rupee, 100, okay? So you get 50 into 100 only. Now, when the other 50 are not working, what is happening is that this 50 is being asked to take care of them, right? So these people have become more dependent. So that the 50 people who, when they were producing 100, they will actually be producing maybe 90, because they also have to take care of this other set of people who are not working. And when you bring in the disability mindset in people, what you're saying is that you're making them dependent in terms of the fact that you are not allowing them opportunities of anything. Now, if these other 50 who were not working, let's say they have a potential to earn maybe 15. If you give them employment, if you give them opportunities, and over long term, the accessibility costs will definitely balance out, because most of the accessibility efforts that you will need to make are in terms of the initial infrastructure. It's not daily efforts. You don't need to daily change a lot of things. So you will now also have those 50 people earning at least that 15. So overall the cost, the whole productivity of the nation or the company goes up. From that perspective, it obviously is for any country, it's much needed that you put in that initial cost, because the long-term costs will definitely outweigh them. And Rachel, I actually had something for you. I was the director education in Delhi. I was in charge of around 700 schools, and I actually initiated sign language as a compulsory third language in all my schools. So I taught my teachers sign language, and it's ongoing. And I put that as part of the school curriculum for all, every school that we had. And these were government schools. In India, what is happening is, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but in India, what is happening is that only people with hearing disability are taught sign language. So what ends up happening is that person with hearing disability can only talk to other people with hearing disability. They cannot even talk to their own family members. So, I thought that it didn't make sense. So we've started that process, and I'm part of the National Board of Education. Recently, I've been made a member there, and I'm actually getting sign language as a compulsory language in third language in almost all schools across the country.
Bravo. I think this is something that we so badly wanted, and I have been speaking about this for a very long time, because otherwise we are just talking amongst ourselves as people who are hearing impaired, to be, because the bigger mission is to include them. And imagine if I have to hire somebody tomorrow who is hearing impaired, I'll think twice, because people in my organization do not understand sign language. But if they were taught sign language from the school, I wouldn't have to think twice before hiring somebody who is deaf or hearing impaired, because it just does not matter. But thank you for bringing that up, Ira. I think that'll also open up a lot of eyes and tickle a lot of brains all across the world, what best can be done to include people with, with disabilities. I wanted to come to you, Adam, because, I have been reading a lot about Microsoft. Surprisingly, a lot of these departments are headed by people with disabilities. Is there a specific reason why, the Department of Digital Inclusion, the Department of Accessibility. Do you think that they understand the problem better, or is there any specific reason why such departments? And also, my add-on question now, from the technology point of view to you, would be that a lot of people are working from home, and a lot of people working in your organization who are disabled are also working from home. How easy or tough has it been to deal with technology, considering we are still trying to cope up with the pace of the virtual world, even otherwise?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me comment on something that Ira just said and Rachel had alluded to. Well, first of all, let me respond to something that Mikhail said. Mikhail, who comes from the startup nation, it's not surprising to me that Israel's leading the way in technology and ability, not to mention policy. But Ira, in Chicago, in Illinois, I think it says something that the person who is the interpreter for the Illinois governor and the Chicago's mayor during COVID, during their briefings, has become something of a local celebrity. I know it breaks all the norms and etiquettes regarding interpreters, but whatever brings awareness, that's important. And by the way, he went to high school with me. Back to your question about the leaders on our teams and what's going on during COVID. It brings a ton, because you have to understand that hiring is only half of the accessibility story at Microsoft, because in addition to trying to make Microsoft the best place for a person with a disability to work, we're also working to make sure that we're building the most accessible software and cloud services, because people can achieve great things when our technology reflects the diversity of everybody who uses it. We know that people with disability are using our products at home, at school, and work, and they can achieve more with the built-in accessibility tools and features in Microsoft technologies. And we know that everybody else benefits from things like, before I send out a presentation, I put it through the accessibility checker to make sure that there's not something that's going to get caught up by a screen reader. Things like, you're seeing this on Zoom, but in Microsoft Teams, the automatic transcription and the automatic subtitles, and using the artificial intelligence to make sure that all the pictures are tagged. That's the other half of Microsoft's accessibility story. Your other question about remote work and COVID, with the disproportional impact of the pandemic on disability employment being top of mind, what we're working on is publishing we have a disability employment resource center. We're updating that to share learnings and toolkits to empower and support employers and job seekers alike. And so this is going to be a public resource, not just for our own employees, but we're using it internally now and testing it. And again, we're leveraging our own tools. Like I said, in chatting with Teams, I can simultaneously share both the video and the screen readers, so that my sighted and blind colleagues can hear what I do on my computer. And it's extremely useful when I'm working across teams. And it's also very helpful that we're including the adaptations on the software across all devices, right? So I can review a presentation in real time or use Microsoft 365 applications on my phone, and I love the ability to easily work across on my tablet and on my computer, and all of those accessibility features just work, right?
I would like to say something also. Microsoft really sees disabled employees as a part of the corporation. And so it's not that you're just emphasizing quality for disabled employees. You're really looking at the total issue. And if I understood something that you said correctly earlier, Adam, I think you said that about 13% of employees at Microsoft identified as having a disability. Was that correct?
In the U.S. And
Yeah.
that's of the 40.
The reason I think that's very important is you see many other companies where the numbers are much lower. One of the reasons why I think the numbers are more accurate at Microsoft is a culture that has been developed over many years now, which enables people to disclose they have a disability, whether or not they need an accommodation. And it's because the company is valuing their employees. And I think that's the ultimate objective of Microsoft, and there are other companies learning about this and doing it. But that is really, when a company says they have 2 or 3% employees who have disabilities, especially a middle-sized company or bigger, my first thought is that's not the real number, because you have plenty of people with legitimate disabilities like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, diabetes, whatever it may be. They do not feel comfortable. They feel stigmatized, deaf and hard of hearing too. And that you're really looking at companies that are changing the culture. And in changing the culture, it improves their ability to recruit, retain, and advance.
And thank you for making the distinction between the criteria and the adaptions. The criteria for hiring people with disabilities at Microsoft is the same as everything else. It's the adaptations. So we have an inclusive hiring site for people who do want to disclose their disability in the hiring process, and that just helps us with the adaptations. And it also helps them because before they interview, they can learn more about other people with disabilities at Microsoft, et cetera. And if you go up there, you'll see that we also host the ability hiring events, the inclusive interviews, the information, training, education, our teams on disability etiquette that we go through. And as far as the numbers go, I don't think our numbers actually quite that accurate either, because number one, it just reflects the US. And number two, since this was the first time we were doing this, we got about 46% that filled out the survey. So that really makes it like 6.1%, but I'm sure that if 100% filled out the survey, you would see exactly what you just said, Judith.
Yes, exactly. I think what Ida also said, that very few people want to admit their disability, so it runs all across. But we're running short of time, and I want your final word about where do you think we can take things forward from here globally and as partnership together across nations, because it is not one person's problem, it is everybody's problem. It is not about one disability, it is about all of us together. So I have 1 minute for each of you. So Mikhail, please go ahead.
Okay, 1 minute is my disability to fit everything in 1 minute. But first of all, let's make lemonade out of lemons. First of all, we are during COVID now, and I think it's an amazing opportunity. For years, we have been told it's not possible, and now everybody is working remotely, everybody is learning remotely. So it is possible, and technology is a very important aspect in this, in making this possible. And it's very important. This is something Access Israel is leading now in Israel and in our international network community. Making technology accessible by design, changing the what we're used to of making accessibility retroactive, fixing things. Now the technology has really become a major part of our lives. We have to make sure it's going to be accessible by design. And lastly, this conference is a great example. Wheels are turning and being invented all over the world. You don't have to invent a wheel when it's already rolling. Share, communicate. Again, I'm inviting everybody to Access Israel's website and webinars. Really, I think that learning from each other will make all of us more inclusive, leaving no one behind.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mikhail. Ira.
I think we need to encourage more and more people to start thinking of people with disabilities as employable and move the conversation towards inclusive workplaces. Remember, for companies, your customer is also people with disabilities. So you're leaving out that huge chunk of your income if you leave these people out of your design, So, and unless you have everybody, different people on board in your development of the products, you won't be making products that are for everyone. So it's important from economic perspective, from societal perspective, from psychological perspective, that we bring everybody into the conversation. So I'm glad I got the opportunity to learn from so many people here. And thank you so much, Varja, for having this. And it's important that all of us recognize that it's not, like you said, one person's problem. It's actually a thing which will solve a lot of our problems the minute we start thinking in terms of all of us as equals and all of us as people who have something to contribute. We can't stand in the way of each other.
Absolutely. And I think every nation has its own peculiar problem, but I think overall we are dealing with the same problem. Judith, would you want to have your last remarks for this?
Sorry, they're cutting a tree down over here, so I had to go on mute. First of all, thank you very much. It's been a great discussion. Let me say that I think we need to really look at the laws that we have in our countries. We need to look at whether those laws are appropriately being enforced. If not, we need to address that. We need money for technical assistance, as everybody has been discussing the need to share information about what's going on. I believe the broader discussion, exactly as Michaela was saying, we need to be looking at what we call universal design. So if we are including disability and disabled people as a portion of the population, universal design is something that will become natural. And the voices of disabled people need to be much more prominent in these discussions. We need to really be looking at the issue of education. In many countries, a substantial number of disabled people are working in the informal sector. They have no protections. We need to be able to have a broader discussion about who disabled people really are, what the barriers really are, and a commitment from both government and the private sector. I think the private sector can really lead the way, and companies like Microsoft, which are international corporations, really within the countries they are working in, can also be a leader in leading by example and getting other companies to do the same.
We've got Adam as a scapegoat for this particular session. But before I come to Adam, I will come to Rachel. Rachel, what's your final remarks?
So I'm so enjoying being here with the view. I think we also need to make sure the people with disabilities are in leadership roles in government, in the private sector, and are able to be leading the agenda because even coming into this role, I see such a difference in being the commissioner of a department and how I could use that to advance accessibility. If we need more of that, I do not want to be the only top commissioner in the government. There needs to be more people with disabilities. So I think we need so much more visibility and also making sure there's authentic representation of people with disabilities in media, that people without disabilities portray the stories of people with disabilities in television and movies. We need actors and with disabilities to be sharing and copying those stories. The other thing I would mention too is that for a long time in the US, people with disabilities as a feasible accommodation were asked for an accommodation of working from home, telework, for whatever, as in disability accommodation. And it was so hard to get this accommodation because you have to be in the office, you have to be physically here, we need to be able to see you doing the work. But then overnight with this pandemic, all of us are working from home. I think that we proved that you can be productive at home. And so I hope that we can incorporate these lessons going forward because it also removes so many of the barriers. For me personally, I think that Zoom and virtual platforms create more access because I'm not thinking about physical spaces or how the room could be set up and all of those dynamics. All I have to do is open my computer. Yes, there are other accessibility barriers, but it gives us more or less the same reference it. So I think there's so much to learn from this moment that we could take with us going forward. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. And we are also trying to figure out how to include or make virtual platforms as accessible as possible. But I think the summing up has to be done by Adam, because all of us have laid a lot of responsibility on his shoulder and lead by example, because that's what Microsoft is all about. So tell us, Adam, what are your final thoughts?
I'm delighted to take on that responsibility on behalf of the employers who may be watching. From an employer perspective, I'm just going to wrap up by saying that traditional recruiting does not work. It does not allow people with disabilities to demonstrate their strengths and their unique qualifications adequately. It doesn't focus on their unique strengths. You need to look at your extended interviewing process and your intentional recruiting process. And I think you'll see that you give the candidates the opportunity to showcase their new talents, while at the same time you get to show off and help them learn about your company as an employer of choice.
Varisha, can I just please say one thing? I'm sorry. I really want us, when looking at post-COVID, to make sure that we are not presuming that everything can be done online. There is a lot of data coming out now in the United States about people who, in fact, are not benefiting from all of the, I'm forgetting the right word, from all of the virtual work that's being done. We're seeing huge problems in poor and minority communities in education. Disabled people are talking about problems, low vision people and others. So let's not make what's happening a panacea. Let's take the good things that we have learned and take them with us and not throw them out. But I think it's really important that we are truly assessing, not just for disabled people, but for everyone, what is working and what is not working.
Absolutely. And I totally resonate that while we are growing, while we are innovating, it cannot replace the human touch. And on that note, I would at some point in my life would like to meet you all in person. This does not compensate on our physical meeting. And on that note, I would request the tech team to bring in the digital trophies. Please get in for Adam first. So we have these little mementos to be presented. I wish I could have presented to you. So if you can just visualize, I'm giving it to you. Can we get the next one for Mikhail, please? So Mikhail, there goes one for you now. And can we get the next one for Ira? So there goes for you, Ira. If you can hold your trophy, I'm handing it over to you virtually. The next one for Rachel. Rachel, that goes for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And the final one, Judith, thank you so much. You're so important to this mission. You're an inspiration to a lot of us. Thank you so much for all of you to join. And even from the accessibility point of view, we have brilliant sessions going on. We have the next one, which will be live for skill development. And then tomorrow we have another 6 sessions. So do tune in, and thank you so much for your valuable inputs.
Varisha, can I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
If you are a company with 1,000 employees and more, an international company, and you got convinced, you're saying, I'm willing to commit. I understand the importance. Go into Valuable 500, an amazing, amazing initiatives led by Caroline Casey. I know that it's going to close at the end of January. We have two more months to fill it up. I think there's about 100 and little places for companies to join. Very important initiative. And I really urge people who got convinced to take it up to the next level.
I'm aware. Thank you so much. So all those who are listening, please take that tip from Mikhail. But thank you so much. I will connect with all of you offline. Thank you so much.